at U of A. Silviculture is his specialty. Prior to coming to the university, he worked as a research scientist at the Canadian Forestry Service and as an operation and planning forester in northern Saskatchewan and Alberta. His main research interest is in the application of intensive silviculture in Alberta. So his title then is very suitable: Opportunities for Increasing Timber Supply in Alberta Through Intensive Silviculture. Take it away, Brad.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about intensive silviculture. So basically what I mean by that is growing trees faster. We've heard a lot about the challenges so far with timber supply in Alberta and British Columbia so far today. I'm going to be talking about some of the opportunities for growing trees faster, maybe meaning some of those, dealing with some of those issues. I'm going to be giving a few ideas, not going into a whole bunch of details. So if you're interested in any of these things, please follow up with me. Okay, so why are we talking about intensive silviculture in Alberta? In general, there's this thought that trees grow slowly here. But in reality, I think most of us in the room here today know that just isn't true. There's huge potential in Alberta for growing trees really quite fast. This map I've showed on this image here is one of my favorite maps from Natural Resources Canada. And what it does is show timber productivity across Canada. The darker the color, more productive. Coastal BC is more productive than other places, we know that. But if you look at the boreal forest, the highest productivity area in the boreal forest is in Alberta, and we have a lot of land. And the reason that is because of our soil here. We've got really finer textured soils, high water holding capacity, high nutrients. This is a great place to grow trees. If we're looking at doing intensive silviculture on our best sites in the boreal forest, Alberta is the place to do it, okay? So if we're looking at intensive silviculture, what can we expect from this sort of management? So what have other areas in the world seen? And in general, there's been about a 3 to 4 times increase in yield with intensive silviculture relative to natural forests, whether you're talking in the Southeast United States, whether you're talking in Scandinavia, whether you're talking in the Pacific Northwest. This 3 to 4 times increase seems to be about normal. So what would that look like in Alberta? If we look at natural stands, MAI of maybe 2 to 4 cubic meters per hectare per year. When we're talking intensive silviculture, we're thinking in the range of 6 to 8 cubic meters per hectare per year. And I have 8+ there because I think we actually have a lot of examples of more intensive silviculture on really good sites of already having MAIs around 8 with older silviculture. So I think that's almost, we could think of that almost as a floor for what the potential is here. But we have the potential to really grow trees quite fast and really shorten the rotation age or increase volumes from these same stands. So now let's move on to what some of the details. What's this going to look like, and what are some of the issues that we're going to have in implementing an intensive silviculture program here? So let's start with plantation management. In general, most of intensive silviculture is in the form of plantations. The past 20+ years in Alberta, we've had really quite good silviculture, tendency to becoming more intensive silviculture. But I think once these stands come online, we're going to be looking at 50-year rotations. 50 to 60-year rotations are going to become the norm. This idea of 70 to 100 to 120-year rotations really isn't going to be happening in the future in our managed forest for the most part. We're also seeing this move towards precision silviculture, which is matching treatments to site to management objectives. So similar to what Barb just talked about, but what's our objective for that site? Do we want to have be able to harvest it at age 50, at age 70? That's going to influence what our silviculture intensity is going to be. Okay. So what are some of the issues we've got? One of the big ones, I think, is with competition control. We have rich sites, we have a lot of competition. Competition control is a dominant silvicultural issue we deal with in Alberta. And we have, in the past, we've had a reliance on herbicides, in particular glyphosate in many cases. Is that going to change? There's lots of issues around the use of herbicides. Is that going to be able to happen in the future? This is a big issue that we've got. We can do more to control the growth of crop trees and stands through the use of competition control measures than almost anything else. So there's huge potential there. If we're losing that tool, it's going to change how we're doing it. On the other side of it, other parts of North America have changed how they're doing competition control and switched to using chemical site preparation herbicides. So prior to planting, sites are being sprayed and providing a few years of lasting competition control to really get trees established. So where that's been implemented, it's really changed how silviculture works in those areas. And is that something we might see here too? But I'm not sure how this is going to play out in the next few years, but there's potential for competition control to really change in Alberta in our plantation management. Another one fits in nicely with what Barb was just talking about, but we need to protect our tree improvement investments. There's the potential, 10% increases in volumes from these trees. Well, that's really only going to happen if we're matching with good silviculture. So what level of competition control is needed? Do we need site prep for these trees to be growing well? How do we maximize that investment and protect that investment there? Other things, looking a bit towards the future, as we think more and more about climate or changing climate in the future, are we producing the right forest for that environment? So things like mixed species plantation, drought-tolerant silviculture, these have become issues in other parts of North America, and I think we're going to start talking more and more about them here in Alberta as well. So the other major part of intensive silviculture is density management. And here I'm talking both pre-commercial thinning and commercial thinning. But the idea here is that you're increasing individual tree growth, you're thinning the stand out, all the resources are going to fewer trees, so they grow a lot faster. And the idea is that they can meet merchantability criteria sooner, so you're going to be able to, they're going to reach a merchantable size a lot faster by doing this. There's also the opportunity to remove some wood mid-rotation through commercial thinning, so you'll get some of that volume out midway through the growth of that stand rather than waiting till just the end. So the graph I've got there on the bottom is from a recent paper we published in the Forestry Chronicle, where we looked at this in natural lodgepole pine stands. But the idea was we compared the volume removed at thinning plus the volume growth on the remaining trees in thin stands. We compared that to the volume growth in unthinned stands. And what we found is that the volume was greater, the potential volume removed from that stand was greater in the thin stands. So there clearly is lots of potential for commercial thinning and density management in Alberta. This is a kind of a standard practice in many places with more intensive silviculture regimes. It's not a standard practice here in Alberta yet, but I think we're moving in that direction. The benefits of this are quite clear, I think, at least in terms of tree growth. So what do we need to make this happen, and where is this going to be happening on our landscape? I think the real potential here is in managed stands, in our plantation settings, more so than in natural stands, but in plantation settings of pine and spruce. How do we need to set these stands up to enable potential commercial thinnings, things like that? We have lots of questions. How much do we thin? What site should we prioritize? So we need some of these decision support tools to help make those decisions. Things like stand density management diagrams are common in most intensive silviculture regimes for different species, different sites, things like that. But we don't really have those tools available to us here in Alberta. And I think there's reason to believe that trees are going to grow differently here and respond differently here than they are in, whether it's British Columbia or further east in the boreal zone. Trees are going to grow differently here and probably respond to management differently here. We have different climate, we have different sites, okay? So we need to develop these sorts of tools for use here to really enable this to be widely applied across the landscape. The other thing we need to be thinking about with density management is how does it link to other environmental benefits potentially. So more so than most other treatments, I think density management has the potential to positively link with risk reduction for fire. So fire smarting, reducing the density in these stands, reducing the stand biomass might have a reduction in the fire risk for these. Perhaps there's links to biodiversity. What are the impacts on soil carbon or other soil processes, things like that. We need to move beyond simply thinking about timber, but what are the other ecosystem values before we move from a kind of a trial approach of commercial thinning to a regular practice of commercial thinning. So I think there's still work to be done before this becomes really widespread. Just about up? Okay. I think you're muted, but I think you said 1 minute, so I'll wrap up here quick. Okay, so let's now mixed wood management. Oftentimes, if we're thinking variable intensity silviculture regime, whether it's a triad or a zoning approach, these might be the sites where we're a lower intensity management, so more extensive, longer rotations, more biodiversity value associated with that cheaper silviculture. But it doesn't need to be. These are really rich sites, and there's lots of opportunities for intensive management as well. The example I've got here on the bottom is density management in aspen. The West Bogey study in Alberta has shown that it's possible to have merchantable stands of aspen that have been thinned by about age 25. So if we want to grow these things fast, there's huge potential for that. On the other case, having spruce plantations or spruce aspen plantations together, that's absolutely something that can happen in these mixed wood settings. I think there's lots of potential for mixed wood management in a variety of different intensities, more intensive, more extensive. And I think I will leave it there because I think my time